In the heart of Eldergrove, a fog-drenched town with cracked cobblestone streets and decaying buildings clinging to the bones of old secrets, stood Blackstone Hall, a towering manor abandoned for nearly a century, surrounded by rusted gates and ivy-choked fences, its walls stained with time and its windows long blind to the sun. It was a place that children dared each other to approach and where even the crows refused to land. But when 25-year-old historian Evelyn Cross arrived from the city with a grant to study the architecture of forgotten estates, she saw not dread, but opportunity, unaware that the manor had waited so very long for someone like her, someone curious, grieving, and alone. Evelyn had recently lost her fiancé in a brutal car accident, and her heart, frayed with sorrow, made her the perfect listener for the voices that lurked within the walls of Blackstone. From the moment she stepped through the ornate front door, time seemed to warp. Her watch slowed, her phone battery drained in minutes, and the air itself whispered like breath over her skin. The caretaker, an old woman named Mabel, handed her the heavy iron keys with shaking hands and whispered, "Don't stay past midnight. The walls don't like to be woken." Evelyn dismissed her warning as small-town superstition and began her work, documenting the carvings on the doorframes, the grotesque murals in the halls, and the unsettling fact that every room had more corners than it should, corners where shadows bled and coldness lingered even in sunlight. The first whisper came on the third night. While reviewing her notes by candlelight, she heard her name softly from the wall behind her bed. When she turned, there was nothing but cracked plaster and faded wallpaper bearing a repeating pattern of faces screaming in silence. She thought it a trick of grief and fatigue, but the voice returned again, then another, and another, until the walls were murmuring over each other. Voices of children, women, men, all whispering through the wood and stone, all begging her to listen. One voice, however, stood out, a low, melodic tone that spoke her name like a prayer and promised answers to the sorrow hollowing her soul. It called itself Elias. Over the days that followed, the house changed. The layout shifted subtly each night. Hallways lengthened, rooms vanished or multiplied, and no matter how many notes she made, the blueprint she tried to draw never stayed the same. The walls whispered stories of those who had lived and died within them, of rituals done in candlelit basements, of a man named Elias Blackstone who had built the manor as a sanctuary for the forgotten, but who had, in time, been consumed by the very walls he erected. Evelyn became obsessed, speaking to the walls late into the night, asking them questions, feeding them her pain, and in return, they showed her glimpses, reflections in glass of figures not her own. Voices speaking in her fiancé's tone, doorways that opened into memories that never happened. She began to dream of Elias, a man with cold dark eyes and a voice of velvet, who kissed her hand and told her that death was not the end, that love could be eternal if she only let go. When Mabel returned with groceries and found Evelyn speaking to the wall in a voice not her own, she begged her to leave, to burn the house down, to stop feeding it. But Evelyn laughed, her eyes distant, her face pale as ash. The walls began to pulse, breathing softly in the dark, and Evelyn no longer left the house. She wrote feverishly in notebooks, pages filled with symbols and languages she didn't know. And every night, the voices grew louder, chanting, praising, mourning. On the seventh night, the walls began to bleed. Black ichor seeped from the cracks and spread across the floor in slow veins, forming a spiral beneath her bed. Evelyn stood at its center, arms open, as if waiting to be embraced. That night, she disappeared. No trace of her was found, save for her journal, soaked in ink and blood, filled with drawings of the manor's rooms from angles that should not exist. And one final line repeated, "He waits behind the walls." After her disappearance, locals reported strange happenings, visitors hearing voices in hotel rooms, tourists vanishing near the old Blackstone grounds, and the manor itself seeming to shift shape in photographs taken minutes apart. Mabel was found hanging in her cottage, her walls etched with the same symbols from Evelyn's journal, and her final note simply read, "I hear them all now. They never stop. Decades passed." And Blackstone Hall once again stood empty, but not quiet. The manor still whispered sweetly, patiently calling to those who mourned, those who heard, those who would listen, and deep within its endless, impossible halls, a woman with white eyes and a voice like Evelyn's moved through the walls, whispering the names of the lost, waiting for someone to answer.